hold on.
Every time we go to work, there's a real risk.
That was a 12-foot swell that just went by. Most of these are 8 and 10 feet.
Every day, Captain Robert Johnson heads out to sea to meet ships as they encounter the crashing surf, unpredictable currents, and fierce winds of the infamous Columbia River Bar.
There's no question but what it's a very hazardous stretch of water.
Captain Johnson is a Columbia River Bar pilot, and his job is to help these mostly foreign vessels cross the bar safely. But first, he has to get on board, using nothing more than a rope ladder.
Okay, are you ready? And you can never let your guard down. The nicest day, you could end up in the water. Then, if everybody doesn't react properly, you can be lost. Good morning, everybody.
And with that, Captain Johnson shepherds another ship across the bar without incident. It's something Columbia River Bar pilots do nearly 10 times a day, all year long, to keep $24 billion worth of goods flowing to ports up and down the river. Only bar pilots can make the call to close the bar due to bad conditions, and they don't do it often.
Columbia River Bar is billed as the roughest in the world. It's always kind of a balance for us of how much risk are we willing to take to keep the economy moving. When the ships can't cross the bar, the entire maritime industry on the Columbia River shuts down, which can back up trains into the Midwest that are bringing grain down to export, cars going all the way to the East Coast from here. You know, the longer that it's closed, the more economic hardship it's going to cause, and not just to the ports on the Columbia River, but the entire economic system.
Ships that want to reach critical Northwest ports have no choice but to run this narrow gap between Peacock Spit in Washington and Clatsop Spit in Oregon. It's a place where waves from as far away as Japan collide headlong with the river. And shifting channels and northwest storms create a violent cocktail of hazards. It's a gauntlet that has killed 2,000 men and has sunk 700 vessels since record-keeping began.
They don't call this the graveyard of the Pacific just to be funny.
There's other places that are equally bad, but they're not major ports where you've got an average of 10 ships a day coming and going. The consequences if things don't go right are it runs aground in a sandbar. If it's a stormy weather, it runs aground on the jetties, in which case it probably breaks in half, it spills cargo, it spills oil. You've got 20 crewmen that may or may not get off of it. I mean, it could be a monumental disaster.
The dangers of the bar and the need for experienced local pilots was recognized even before Oregon statehood.
We trace our heritage back to Captain George Flavelle, who was here in the mid-1800s. Captain Flavelle required all of his people to have sailed as shipmasters before they became pilots. We have that same requirement today, and it traces itself back to Captain Flavelle.
But you see all these little targets? Every one of them is a ship.
Modern-day pilots work 16 days on, followed by 14 days off.
Yeah, his time is 9:05.
They can be called out at any time, day or night, on good days and bad.
It's such an ongoing thing, it just never stops. And that's what you have to keep up on. Yeah, it's 13:38.
Today, a crew heads out to pick up a pilot who has finished guiding an outbounder across the bar. The pickup crew heads out in one of two 72-foot fast boats the pilots own that can travel up to 30 knots and make the run in about an hour in good weather. But conditions are growing rough.
We get out into this area around buoy 14 is where the swell really starts to pick up.
To make the pilot transfer, the pilot boat has to run neck and neck with a 600-foot-long bulk carrier as it pitches and rolls in the swell.
We like to have about a 12-knot boarding speed. If they're going too slow, it's really hard to pin the vessel alongside.
That pilot boat was made to have 10 collisions with a big steel ship every day. At its best, we land very gently. At its worst, we crash against the side of the ship.
As a ship looms 20 to 50 feet above the water, the pilot boat noses into position to create a landing zone.
I don't believe I'm going to jump off of this nice big ship that's moving around so much onto that little boat. But that's what I'm going to do. All of your senses are heightened. If something's going to go wrong, now's when it's going to go wrong.
Captain Dan Jordan makes this jump look easy.
It's sheer terror followed immediately by an enormous feeling of satisfaction. It takes every ounce of strength you have at times. It takes a great deal of skill and judgment. The bar pilot can never be wrong. If we err on the side of caution, the river becomes uncompetitive. But on the other hand, we can't err on the side of being some kind of a cowboy out there.
The year before I got into the pilots here, I was captain of a ship carrying ammo to the Persian Gulf. So it's a different set of dangers.
Today we consider ourselves very progressive, and these are among the most modern pilot boats in the world. But the Columbia River bar pilots used a rowboat to get between the pilot boat and the ship up until the mid-1950s. They would row in and probably crash against the side of the ship, grab that rope, and up you'd go. Then they progressed, and it was a huge step, was the Peacock.
I've been here since 1981. I'm the longest serving pilot here right now.
George Ware knows every inch of the Peacock. The boat now rests peacefully in front of the Columbia River Maritime Museum.
Come on into the hellhole.
George remembers its wilder days.
It's been 16 years since I've been in here. I was kind of wondering, I wonder if I should walk around and just get reacquainted with it, but it's like I was here last week. These ports are all an inch thick, and most of them have been knocked out at one time or another.
The Peacock was a rough ride. It was loud, reeked of diesel fuel. Its round-bottom shape was based on a German rescue boat design that helped it tackle heavy seas, but not comfortably.
You didn't even try to move without having a hold of something, like a bucking bronco, if the closest I can come to it.
What made the Peacock legend, though, was a small boat called the daughter boat that pilots launched from the deck.
This is what makes the whole thing work. This is the daughter boat.
The Peacock itself wasn't built to run up against ships, so the daughter boat was used to ferry pilots back and forth.
The Peacock would sort of buzz in alongside fairly close, 100 feet off the ship. The boat operator had already started the engine on the daughter boat, so the engine was loud and a big part of what the Peacock was.
Returning the daughter boat to the Peacock was always a high-stakes adventure.
We're talking about 18, 20, 25-foot swells at times. And the Peacock is just rolling and pitching. The stern of the Peacock goes over here, so he comes over here, and now it's over there. So the boat would run up into the ramp as far as it could go, and the pilot boat operator would reach down with this hook into that bridle, and the winch would winch the daughter boat back up into position, take the pilot home.
Before the Peacock came into service, rough conditions forced pilots to close the bar hundreds of hours a year, too unpredictable for most shipping companies. After the Peacock, closures dropped by about half, and shipping on the Columbia boomed.
Everything I see brings back memories. You always knew it was going to bring you back. Maybe not the way you left, but it was going to bring you back.
Today, the Peacock has been retired, and the bar pilots have entered a brave new world, 70% of ship boardings now don't even involve a boat.
It is unique. We were the first pilot group in the United States to use a helicopter, and a lot of it has to do with the rough weather out there.
Yes, sir.
In bad conditions, it can take a pilot boat several hours to reach a ship. By helicopter, Captain Dan Jordan is looking down on a ship just 12 minutes after taking off from Astoria.
Coming around to the right.
He clips into a 3/16-inch wire before dropping 30 feet to the deck.
Once they're out the door, there's nothing I can do. I'm hanging under the helicopter and put my life in their hands. Yeah, it takes a little getting used to stepping out the door and letting go and trust on the cable and somebody up there lowering you down to the ship. The idea of going out in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning in a storm, makes it a little hard to sleep beforehand. There's times when they pick you up off the ship in the middle of the night. I wind up swinging back and forth underneath the helicopter on the cable. I don't really like that.
Bar pilots are mariners at heart, and the idea of using helicopters instead of boats didn't come easy.
That was a tough one, especially for us old-timers. And I can be honest, I'm still getting over it.
But helicopters have proven far more efficient than boats. And since pilots began using choppers in 1997, there have been no deaths and few accidents, making heliboarding even safer than boat-to-boat transfers.
In my career here, we've lost 3 seamen over the side rigging pilot ladders. Swinging around under a helicopter at 3 in the morning in 60 knots of wind is not exactly a safe thing, but compared to getting on a ship in bad weather, it's safer.
I see those ships go by and I get a pretty good view from my house. As old as I am now, I'm certainly glad I don't have to do it anymore.
Among the Columbia River bar pilots, Don Nelson is known to everyone. Now 88, he's lived his entire life within sight of the ocean. Don started out back when rowboats were used to transfer pilots between the pilot boat and a ship. The oars were known as idiot sticks.
As a kid, I grew up in Young's Bay, so I had a rowboat and a sailboat, so I was well used to the idiot sticks, believe me.
Don made 50,000 crossings of the bar in his time, a record.
Yeah, a lot of people have told me, well, you must know where every rock is on that bar. I says, no, I don't, but I know where they ain't.
Don's long career came at a cost. He carries scars from one storm in 1962 that cost the life of a dear friend.
Those rowboats were always getting rolled over in a big storm, and I was with Captain Ed Quinn and my boat partner Bill Wells, so we rowed over the boat, and Captain Quinn came down the ladder, and we turned around to go back to the pilot boat, and here comes this terrible squall. It must have been blowing 70, and swells probably 15, 20 feet, rolled us over. So we're in the water, and the pilot boat lost us. Couldn't find us. And 17 hours later, my boat partner, Bill, had died. We finally got ashore, and we were so weak, we had to hang on to each other. But the weather had not broken around 5 o'clock that next morning. We would never have made it.
Amazingly, both Don and his partner Ed Quinn returned to work, but tragedy soon struck again.
Well, about a year later, he fell off a Jacob's ladder and drowned. Now that broke my heart. But that's the ocean.
There's beautiful days and there's days out there where I go, wow, why am I doing this? I know why I'm doing it because I love it, but there's days out there where it gets rough. And that's one reason I think complacency doesn't kick in too often, because every time it's different.
When a bar pilot's job is done well, the work doesn't make headlines.
Forward right 25.
Thank you.
But because of their work, the rest of us can take in the view from Astoria and watch ships that weigh 70,000 tons glide effortlessly up and down river, as if by an invisible hand.
You walk away knowing that you've done something not a lot of other people in the world could do. It's terrifying, but it's the most satisfying job in the world.
He's at the door.